All right, quick side kick here into a different type of activity that we can, of course, do with Project Dog Waffle, which is kind of doing painting. This was, before anything else, really a paint program. And so there are a number of ways to create some nice visuals. This one, in fact, one thing I'm going to do is kind of go backwards on this one. The last step I did on this was to apply a filter. Let me show that filter again. On the filter artistic, there is a filter called graphic pen. And now I'm applying it again on top, but the mode I chose was the crayon. There's scribble, there's a couple of others. And the results can be very different from one mode to another. Color mode, the pen size, all those things play into how the artwork looks in the end. Before this, let's step back with the undo. So along the toolbar here, you got the green arrow for the undo. Before that, this is what it looked like. Let me zoom in a little bit. And I'm using the Shift and Control key with the right button sideways to zoom in and out. Left button would be moving it around. So that's a general user interface feature you may want to become familiar with and start using. Control Shift down, and then left button to move around, right button to zoom in. And so that's how you can quickly go and look at different parts of the picture you're working at. So what else did I have here? And you know what, before I even proceed, let me go back. Right clicking on that green arrow will go forward actually. And what I'd like to do is save that entire sequence. See, if I click left here, you can see everything that happened here over time. And actually not everything, but I could save that as an animation. This is sort of a history look back. So there is a capability that does that. And you know what, at the moment I don't remember where it is, so we'll take a look at that later. It's probably one of the animation filters though. Filter, plugins, miscellaneous. It's probably one of those. And what we'll do is we'll look for that in a separate tutorial, because it's kind of a nice feature if you do a lot of painting for a while and then you say, well, I would like to kind of have this turned into an animation. Basically a frame sequence that shows everything that's in the undo buffer. And so what did we have here? Going back to painting, this is the image, and I'd like to kind of describe how I created that from scratch. So initially, it looks like we have the blue sky, we have some trees or bushes, we have some grass, these are particle brushes, we have some other image brushes, these are tiny small images. Some preset brushes, and then we also have a frame built around it. And in fact, I also created an animation, and I don't have it here anymore, but we'll take a look at that again, how to create an animation that looks like it's sort of raining on a window, as if this was actually a window. We're looking out and there is raindrops falling on that window. Or maybe we'll add some snowflakes or something like that. So let me reset things a little bit. Let me go to animated selection, animated swap image, undo that. There you go. Alright, so first things, we have an image. Start, new, close, and create an image of, I don't know, some standard dimensions. 720 by 482, why not? There you go. And so the first things I would do is perhaps create a sky. Now if we know what we want to paint, we can click the brush and or right click it and select the brush that we will use to actually paint that sky. But there are other ways to generate the skies, and if we're a little bit on the lazy side, what we'll do is we'll select the filter render and render a cheap sky right there. Alright, that's not the only way, but that's certainly one way we can make this happen. And let's go play with the size a little bit and call that a sky. Alright, so one thing I always like to do is store under the image menu, store a copy of this image. You never know, you might get back to it. For instance, if you do all sorts of changes to this here and you mess it up and you want to quickly get back to it, just click on the thumbnail and it restores that. Alright, so now the next thing we had is sort of a little hillside in the middle, upon which we will place some trees and perhaps some more grass and some other foliage like flowers. So we need some brushes that we will use to paint kind of along this shape where the hill is, but we want to put that with a different type of brush, not with these flowers, or not with the default brush, which is the large airbrush, okay, not with this one. What we'd like to do is actually use the particle brushes. So you'll see them here. There are some particle brushes. You also see that that's in the context bar, so it depends on which tool you've actually selected. If you select other tools, you might not see the particles. For some of them you will, because they also use the brush as part of the tool. But the fill bucket here, for instance, doesn't use it. And so the brush tool is one, the linear tool, typically that will work to choose the particle brushes. Another place where you can see the particle brushes is when you right-click that brush tool, and you'll see a lot of predefined brushes, including access to the particles, the particle brush presets. And so that's where we can see batty grass, dog willow, brown hair, a couple of others, and you might have added your own. There are more places where you can see those. There is also this here. This is actually the preset menu of the brushes, same as when you right-click on the brush tool itself, right? Simple airbrush, pen, pencil. Simple airbrush, pen, pencil, and so on. If you are a total beginner on Dog Waffle, I definitely encourage you to go through these brushes and paint with them. Find out what they do. Some of them don't actually paint. Some of them will make the selection. When you do a paint on alpha, you're painting a selection. That's a very powerful tool. And then there's a couple of other things here. One thing we'll do is also look at the browse media. Okay, many of the brushes that you create, you will want to save, and not just save the image that they contain, but also all the behaviors and parameters, such as what you see here on the settings, all these parameters that define how the brush changes randomly, some color, saturation, or based on the speed, and so on. All these parameters you may want to save along with the brush and make that sort of a media description. And so the browse media gives you access to a collection of different media that have been stored, and some of these are already included with the program, many of these actually, but I've created two new subfolders here, my anim brushes and my own brushes, and we might have others. I think I had a Don Felipe here somewhere. We can create those new folders right here, and then we can save an existing brush here with this. And so, for instance, I have a brush, I don't know, bicycle one, spinning meteor. This one here is kind of a little meteor that I created in Carrara, and it's spinning around, and I can use that as a dark, rocky structure, and maybe then go to the particle brushes. Let's go open those particle brushes right there, and let's make sure we pin it down so we'll stay there for a little while. Let's load the brushes that we get to call batty grass. There you go. And then put some grass right there. Right, and you can see this is actually a good way to kind of create a mix of everything. Perhaps we can also now use the foliage brushes. That's another category. You have 4 categories of particle brushes, really. And the original ones we also used to call them optiposticks, so it's still here, optipus. It's like a optical octopus with 8 legs going in all directions, and really actually hundreds of legs, hundreds of particle trails. That's the origin for the name here. And then we have bristles and orbicals and foliage. Now the foliage really is where you draw a full tree or a bush, even perhaps with flowers at the end of each of the twigs and branches. And the default one looks a bit like this. Looks a lot like that actually. And let's go undo that and load a different preset. Now unfortunately we don't have icons for this yet. That will ultimately be something that will help a lot to recognizing which one we really want to use. Here we have just names, but there's a lot to explore by just having some fun and playing with it. This one's a big tree, perhaps not what we need. Maybe we can change the parameters though, because all of this is rule settings, and then there are some general parameters overall: maximum lifespan, rule count, maximum number of particles, fog amount, gain, pen size. So you can probably play with these a little bit to make some variants, some changes to it. Or you can go back to the presets and see if there is one that suits your need a little bit better. I'm going to go and undo this and see if I can create a tree. That one's too bright in the front. Undo that. Let's go find one here, a classic tree number 9. Ooh, that one I like. Okay, and I think there's one with some snow flowers or something, some colorful flowers on top. Wait, I don't want to go to the rules library, I want to go to the load. Let's see if we can find something. There's some evergreens, flint bush, grass painter is pretty interesting too. Tropical. Snow in the mountain top. I think that one is kind of interesting and colorful. Yeah, there you go. So we have something else there. There you go. I remember it looks a little bit like a magnolia tree or something like that. At least the flower parts. And let's say we want to also have a couple of flowers, talking about flowers, a couple of flowers here. Let's go back to these presets here. There are some effects and effects brushes like smearing, just to get an idea of what that looks like. You get some phenomenal smearing effects there. Let's undo that though for now. And go down to the organic effects, and there's some flowers there. There's also some leaves. And of course these correspond to the shapes. When you click on the shapes here, you can see some of the shapes, including some flowers. And what we can do is paint them in different places. Now this is too tight together. The step between one flower to the next is too small. That's called the step distance. So let's go and actually select the settings again and tack that one down, pin it down. And when we look at the step, we'll see it here. But we'll see that also up here there's a couple of shortcuts like this one here, the step distance. So what I would recommend is make that a little bit bigger, just so that the flowers are a little bit more sparse, not so close together, right? Having a small step distance from one impact of the brush to the next impact, it's going to make it easier that way to really just focus on a few nice flowers here or there. What I'll do is I'll have a colony of blue flowers here on the left side. Let's make perhaps this dark blue. There you go. And then something maybe pink around this side, and to bring them in agreement with kind of orange to yellow around there. So we have a couple of different flowers. We have some bushes, some trees, some skies in the background. Now we need to start making some magic by framing it, putting some wooden frame around it. Let's first take a snapshot. And I would also recommend at that point, if you are worried about losing this due to out of memory crash or whatever it is, power outage, battery running out of juice, what you may want to do is store the image first of all, so you have a snapshot. You can easily get back to that. It's not saved in on the hard drive though, right? You can click on here, you can click on here, that will restore it, but it's not saved on the hard drive. So make sure that you also save it. You can go to the file menu. You can actually even under the image menu copy it to the clipboard. There is a clipboard option there and say copy to clipboard. That grabs a snapshot of that. So if you open another image viewer like Earphone View, you can Control V to paste it there. You have a safe copy there too. So you can exit Dog Waffle. It's still there in Earphone View as well. But let's go back now to this and add some frame around it. So the wooden frame is something you see under the image menu. And it's not just a wooden frame, but there is a frame your work option there and a preview of what it will look like, right? So here's the original image, and you'll see it in the smaller area here. And there are some other options. You can actually open the gradient editor here too and import some papers and import gradients, because there are a lot of gradients that you can choose for the wooden frame here. Right, so you can scroll through these as well here and just go up to the next one and so on. I like some of these brownish ones. All right, okay, so there's actually also a little bit of a paper, sort of a cardboard area. That's the matte one and matte 2, the white one and the gray one. If you don't want those, if you want to make it more look like it's actually a view through an open window, maybe we want to give them 0 width, right? The size, if you put that to 0, you see that's gone, the gray one's gone. Now let's do the other one 0, the white one is gone, and we are left with just our image filling the frame. And now on the frame you can add some texture if you want to make it look a little bit more like some wooden texture. There's a wood grain, there's some antique, let's stay with the wood grain, and there are some other options, the scale of it and so on. But let's say we want to do that, or maybe a slightly different, a bit more rustic looking, I don't know. Oh, that's interesting here, because if this is a view out through a window, it would be brighter perhaps on the wood close to the window. than it is on the dark side towards the inside of the room. So this could convey that sort of three-dimensionality to it a little bit. Or maybe a bluish tint might actually be even better. But I don't have one here easily selected, so I'll just stay with that and copy that. So that's actually going to expand the canvas a little bit. The image buffer is now a little bit bigger, and the image, still at its original size, has now been framed. I'm going to store that one too. Store image copy, and there we are. So we can always see this one or this one, but these of course are tiled into the upper left corner. If we want to center them, we can also do that. We can go and center it, and let's say for instance we erase it and then go here and center it. That's one way to work with that. Or you can go and scale to fit, or then click this to reset it with the frame around it. Now there is going to be a need for a little bit of an animation with this, so I'm now continuing our discovery of what else can you do with Dog Waffle. There's a lot of filters to explore. In fact, one might be a little bright sunrise here, sun rising up from just behind or just barely touching the rock here. So one thing I'll do is I'll go to the filter and find myself some photographic maybe. Where do we have the special? Actually, it's a tool, it's not a filter. It's this one here. We have a couple of tools here. Right click on this and you'll see the Nova with some options, and that's actually an interesting one too if you just want something relatively simple. Right, just a little Nova flash like that. I call that simple by comparison with the next one. If you right click on that tool again, there is a lens flares collection there, and that one is a little bit more powerful, more sophisticated. So if you look at something like this one here, that's when you'll see a little bit more wow on that lens, reflections and lens flares and that sort of thing. So you can combine them, you can paint a few on top of each other to get a little bit more of this, a little bit more of the bluish haze around it with this one. So lots of different results you can get from that. Alright, so that's another stage in our image. Let's go store that one. And again, you know, be safe, save it to a file every once in a while. Save often is the mantra for digital artists. The next thing I want to do is add some snowfall or some perhaps even some rain. Make it look like there's rain splashing against the window here. Now to do that, we'll want to add an animation, turn this into an animation, that is. Alright, so to turn this into an animation, you go to the animation menu and create one, and you say how many frames you want that to be. Let's say we want 99 frames, and there you go. You now have an animation of 99 frames, but of course each frame is identical to each other and to that first one that got copied into the frame, the placeholder of each frame. So far it doesn't look like much is moving when we play this. Even if we say we want to play it at 30 frames a second, that's FPS, frames per second. Let's go here. Still no change because each frame is identical. What we need to do is introduce some sort of changes, and what we could do is add some snowfall. So if I go to the timeline editor, you'll see similar filters for the timeline as opposed to the ones that were here for the current image. Some of these are actually also for the timeline or the entire animation because they're animated, and even along this there are a few which will go and have an option to apply itself on the entire animation, not just on a single current frame. But with the timeline editor you get to do more than apply it across each frame. You also get to change and keyframe the amount of filter that's applied. The parameters that you see here are keyframeable. Right, so you can change, for instance, have it go from total darkness, or maybe a little bit of blue is visible. It's deep dark night, but it's not totally black, and then pitch black the night, and then you go here and you have a little bit of sunrise or just more light showing. But now we want to add some snowfall. So here's the snowfall. I'm going to go down to the filters, then here animated filters collection, snowfall. Now if I don't do anything else, the snowfall will apply. In this preview you can see it perhaps a little bit better. Let me just increase the size. It will apply it all over the image, so even over the frame, and that may be okay, but that's not looking too good in my books. So I'm going to need to add a sort of a filter, or not a filter, a mask that prevents the filter from rendering outside of the frame. I want it rendered over the background image here. my beautiful painted image, but I don't want it to render over the frame because that's the frame of the window. I'm inside the house, I'm looking through the window to the snowfall on the outside. So one way to do that is to work with some of these tools here that are the selection tools. There is a selection mask or the alpha channel, this one here, this one, there's some oval versions, there's a lasso tool, there's a magic wand. Let's use the one here, the rectangle to alpha, and what that one will do is allow me to make a selection. Let me demonstrate it here. Small selection, you see the marching ants, barely visible, but there they are. You can do that on the entire scene except for the frame, and now you have the marching ants around it. It's a bit difficult at times to see it, so in addition to the marching ants, which is enabled here, you can also show an overlay alpha that gives it sort of a pink tone if it's not selected, and the part that is selected you will see at its original color. Alright, so let's go and use that to now actually select even something slightly different, which is first of all, there's another way you can do a selection. You can use the free transform tool, and by default it will lodge itself into the current selection, but you can, from here you can go out, and if you didn't have a selection actually initially, what you could do, let's say if I erase it with Control D, if you go here to free transform, it grabs the entire image. I mean, it lodges itself on the entire image, and you can use that to quickly select the rectangular area. It's actually much more powerful than that, but you right click here, you can say a variety of things, including just cancel, because that's not the tool I wanted to really apply here. Let's go back to my rectangular tool and just select it like this. Okay, so that's one way that we can select an area and then apply a snowfall just there. Look at it here. Now you have the snowfall still happening. In fact, let me really make these oversized. You can see the snowflakes are happening, but they are not happening outside of the image. They are not happening over the frame, only on the inside. So that's the selection mask, if you want, blocking access for the filter, or even for you to paint. If you go to the paint brush again, you can paint on the inside, but you cannot paint on the outside where the selection is not allowing it. All right, let's undo that, and now apply no, actually I don't want the snowfall on everything. I want the snowfall on just the background sky. Now that's a little bit trickier. There's a couple of different ways we'll have to go about that, and that depends a bit on what is actually in the background. Is it a single color? Then we could pick that color if that's the only thing that's showing that color. If the trees are not the same blue as the sky, then we could simply select the colors. But we have some blue here, so we have to be careful about that. Still, you could go with the selection and select by colors, by color key, and you could go and click here on the blue, and it will give you the idea with the magic wand where that selection is found, where that color is found, and you could go perhaps around here or around here, and then give it some tolerance, and maybe say, no, let's hue saturation value. So a couple of different ways by which you could go and select something that looks like it's all close to that blue, but there is more to the background than the blue. So this one's a little bit difficult. We cannot use really just the colors to choose that background. And we have the blue on those flowers in the front. Another way, therefore, will be to select it by painting on it. I mean, you could use the magic wand for some of it. I would simply go and perhaps use the selection, the lasso, for some of it. Like here, you can draw around, right? But that's not it. You need to use the shift key to add some more here. And I'm doing a very sloppy, quick job here, but you can see that that's one way. Sometimes you'll use it with the shift key to select multiple parts. Or right-click on that brush tool again, and you'll find there is a paint on alpha. And I mentioned earlier that will allow you to paint your selection. So we'll use the blobby one here to actually paint our selection right on it. And don't worry about selecting into the frame here. For now, we'll just go a little bit into it here. Click here or there. Do a couple of sporadic selections. With the right button, you can erase the selection. You can remove from the selection. With the left button, you can add to it. So the whole key, the whole idea here is to get a couple of random looking holes through those twigs not too many, so we can actually see the snowflakes appear later when we render and disappear again. Here we'll go and paint along the edge of the grass and the rock. Remove if we have gone too far. There you go. Again, the frame will erase later. We'll cut it out on the frame here soon. But right now I think we're close to done. Now I need to remove these parts that are over the wooden frame. For that I'm gonna use again the rectangle selection, but instead of just removing it, I need to use a shift key to make sure I leave what's already there. And as I'm going like this, I can go and erase. Now if the left button is actually adding, I need to use the right button to remove it. Right button with the shift key down to remove from the current selection without affecting the rest of the current selection outside of that rectangle that I'm drawing. And so with that I can cut and trim my selection in such a way that I end up having nothing over the wooden frame, and everything here looks pretty good now. So that's really what we do a lot when we work with more sophisticated selection areas. We need to kind of use a combination, put our thinking hats on there and use a combination of different tools to make that selection a reality. Sometimes it's as simple as using the lasso, the magic wand initially, and then you do some touch-up with the very special brushes we have here in Howler. And what I'll do next is, of course, to use this mask. Now this mask is very precious. I've spent a while creating it, so I'm going to go to the selection mask and store it, just like we can store the images we have here, right? So we can reset it and paint them back. We can also restore and work with the alpha channel, the selection mask. All right, so here is our image. Let's clear the selection just so we can see the entire image. We can replace here, click there on the stored alpha to replace this selection, and we're ready to do some magic now with the animation. If we look back at our snow filter, it's now snowing only through the opening in the background sky. Right, so we have this mask that's acting as a selection mask at the alpha channel, and the snowflakes are appearing or being rendered only where they actually are allowed to do so. Now the next thing I'll do is actually make those snowflakes a little bit more reasonable in size. It's a bit difficult to see in the preview now, but we know that that's going to be a good size. Perhaps what I'll want to do is really have a stream, a horizontal, almost blowing blizzard of snowflakes going sideways. So I'm going to give it the wind speed, blowing to the left or blowing to the right. Let's leave it to the right, and a little bit less on the turbulence. And then I'll just click render. Let's go apply right here in the upper right corner of the timeline editor. Let's go apply that. Make sure the save undos is checked so we can actually have it undone if it's not the way we wanted it. But what we can do now is, if we move this a little bit to the left here, we can play it in here and we can see some of the snowflakes coming through. Very few. Maybe we really need more than that. So let's go do the following. First of all, let's undo the animation that we just did, and this time we'll have many more snowflakes. So increase the snowfall amount. That's this one here. And then also make them a little bit smaller. We want them to look farther away. Have the wind speed more to the right and velocity a little bit less. So it really kind of starts going almost horizontal. And apply that. And that takes a little bit longer to render now, but you can see more snowflakes now here, and as we play it, it's now showing that snowstorm in the background. Let's do it a few times that way. Okay, so the parameters we like now, so except we could actually change the size perhaps a little bit, but everything else is good. Let's just render it again. Let's apply it one more time. Okay, and one more time. So now we have really kind of a blizzard happening there. Let's play it. There you go. Now when that's happening, we still probably will have a few snowflakes also in the foreground, and to do that we'll just have to go back to animating just a few, rendering just a few of the snowflakes, and bigger ones because they're closer and they're not going to move as fast. They're going to move a little bit further stronger down, and perhaps with a little bit more turbulence. Right? Imagine there's sort of an awning or a gazebo and you're under the roof and some of the snowflakes coming up close. then they will not appear only where the sky is in your selection. So at this time you need to clear the alpha. You need to remove that selection mask. I don't think we do that here. We'll just do that here from the selection menu. Clear the alpha. And oops, we need to make sure though we have no snowflakes appearing on the wooden frame. So let's go to the selection mask here with the rectangle and make sure we only select to enable that interior rectangular, that window, so to speak. And so now we can go and render this. And we should now have a couple of bigger, you see one here, a couple of bigger snowflakes. Let's play it, and there you go. Now maybe we can actually give it a few more, so let's apply it one more time. And perhaps a few really big snowflakes here with a lot of turbulence. And perhaps a little bit different snow. Maybe there's a little turbulence in snow. The wind is blowing the other direction for that. There you go. So now we have really a mix of different snowflake effects, almost like a turbulent effect. You can see some going to the right, some going to the left. Maybe that's too many. Good thing we have the undo level for once here. Undo that and just give it very few of those with a lot of turbulence. Apply that, and that might be just perfect. There you go. Alright, so we have this animation, and I think that will be good enough for today to start. If you want to recreate something like this, I hope this gave you an idea of how to start working with brushes, different types of brushes. Our beloved particle brushes, foliage brushes that were introduced, I think, in version 8. And there is a lot more to explore, but let's get started doing this. Thanks for watching.